The wind whistled through the barren trees, and dark storm clouds loomed overhead as Emily trudged through the muddy forest. She clenched the locket around her neck, the only memento she had left of her mother. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled over roots and rocks, desperate to escape the horror that haunted her every step. The sound of heavy footsteps behind her made her heart pound in fear. She quickened her pace, branches scratching her arms and tears mingling with raindrops on her cheeks. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around to face a figure cloaked in shadow. "Emily," a deep voice rumbled, sending shivers down her spine. "You can't run from your destiny." She tried to pull away, but the grip on her was unyielding. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the face of the man before her. It was him, the man she thought she had left behind in the ashes of her past. "Please let me go," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. His eyes bore into hers, cold and calculating. "You know too much, Emily. It's time to pay for your sins." With a sudden burst of strength, she managed to break free and sprinted deeper into the forest, branches slapping against her as she pushed through the undergrowth. She could hear him behind her, his footsteps gaining on her with every passing second. As she reached the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbled beneath her feet, sending her tumbling down into the darkness below. The world spun around her, the wind whipping through her hair as she fell further and further into the unknown. Just when she thought all hope was lost, a pair of strong arms wrapped around her, breaking her fall. Gasping for breath, she looked up into the eyes of a stranger, a glimmer of kindness in his gaze. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping her to her feet. Emily nodded, her heart still racing with fear. She knew she couldn't outrun her past forever, but maybe, just maybe, with this stranger by her side, she could face whatever lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sleepy town, Sarah stood alone at the edge of the cliff, her heart heavy with the weight of the secrets she carried. She stared out at the vast expanse of the ocean, its waves crashing against the rocks below, as tears welled up in her eyes. She had come to this place seeking solace, hoping to find some semblance of peace amidst the chaos that had consumed her life. But instead, all she found was a deepening sense of despair, a feeling that the walls were closing in on her, suffocating her with each passing moment. A sudden rustling behind her made Sarah turn, her heart racing with fear. To her surprise, it was Alex, the boy from the bookstore, standing there with a concerned look on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, taking a cautious step towards her. Sarah wiped away her tears, trying to compose herself before speaking. "I'm fine," she muttered, looking away from his piercing gaze. But Alex didn't buy it. He could see the pain etched in her features, the way her hands shook ever so slightly as she tried to hide them in the pockets of her coat. "Sarah, you don't have to go through this alone," he said gently, reaching out a hand to touch her arm. And in that moment, something inside Sarah cracked open. The floodgates burst, and she found herself pouring out her story to this stranger, this boy who had somehow managed to break down her walls with just a few simple words. She told him about the accident that had changed everything, about the guilt that ate away at her soul, about the desperate need to keep her family together at all costs. And as she spoke, she felt a weight lifting off her shoulders, a sense of relief washing over her like a wave. Alex listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, his presence a comforting anchor in the storm that raged within her. And when she was done, he simply wrapped his arms around her, holding her close in a silent embrace that spoke volumes. In that fleeting moment, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a spark of light in the darkness that threatened to consume her whole. And as she clung to Alex, a newfound sense of strength blossomed in her heart, a resolve to face her demons head-on and emerge victorious, no matter the cost. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over the rolling hills, Sarah found herself standing at the edge of a cliff overlooking the vast ocean. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of everything she had been through in the past few weeks. The betrayal, the heartache, the loss, it all seemed too much to bear. She closed her eyes, letting the salty breeze wash over her, trying to find solace in the sound of the crashing waves below. But amidst the chaos of her emotions, a voice broke through the deafening silence. "Sarah," a familiar voice called out from behind her. She turned to see Alex standing there, his eyes reflecting a mix of concern and determination. "I can't do this anymore, Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "You don't have to do it alone," he replied, taking a step closer to her. "We can face this together, whatever it is." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at him, realizing that she didn't have to carry the burden on her own. For so long, she had felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. But now, in this moment, she felt a glimmer of hope. As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of pink and orange, Sarah took a deep breath and reached out her hand to Alex. In that simple gesture, she found the strength to begin to heal, to let go of the pain and start a new chapter. Hand in hand, they walked away from the edge of the cliff, leaving behind the darkness of the past and stepping into the unknown future. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a spark of optimism kindling inside her heart, a whisper of possibility in the wind. Sarah's heart raced as she stood on the edge of the cliff, the wind whipping through her hair and tears streaming down her face. Below her, the turbulent waves crashed against the rocks, their relentless power a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, her hands trembling as she clutched the crumpled note in her pocket. The words scribbled on it taunted her, a painful reminder of the betrayal that had shattered her world. But as she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, she felt a sudden surge of determination wash over her. She couldn't let him win. She couldn't let her pain dictate her future. With a fierce resolve, she tore the note to shreds and watched as the wind carried the pieces away, like her past being swept into oblivion. Taking a step back from the edge, Sarah wiped away her tears and squared her shoulders. She had a long journey ahead of her, a journey to rediscover herself and find the strength to move on. And as she turned away from the cliff, a spark of hope ignited within her, illuminating the path to a new beginning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet town, Emma found herself standing in front of the abandoned house at the end of Willow Street. The house was rumored to be haunted, but Emma was not afraid. In fact, she was drawn to it, as if an invisible force was pulling her closer. As she pushed open the creaking front door, a chill ran down her spine. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. Emma took a deep breath and stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The interior of the house was even more eerie than she had imagined. Cobwebs clung to the walls like sinister veils, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. She could hear the faint sound of whispers echoing through the halls, sending shivers down her spine. With each step she took, Emma felt as if she was being watched. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, making her question if she was truly alone in the house. But she pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within its walls. As she reached the top of the creaking staircase, a cold gust of wind blew through the hallway, causing the candles lining the walls to flicker and dim. Just then, Emma heard a soft whimper coming from one of the rooms. With trembling hands, she pushed open the door to reveal a small, dusty nursery. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, and old toys lay scattered on the floor. But what caught Emma's attention was a faint glow emanating from the corner of the room. As she approached, the glow grew brighter, illuminating a small, intricately carved box sitting on a dusty shelf. Without hesitation, Emma reached out and opened the lid, revealing a collection of old photographs and letters tied with a faded ribbon. With trembling hands, she began to read the letters, her eyes widening in shock as she uncovered the heartbreaking tale of a forbidden love that had torn a family apart. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the tragic truth behind the whispers that haunted the house. But as she turned to leave, a sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut, trapping her inside. Panic gripped her heart as she frantically tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. And in that moment, as the whispers grew louder and the shadows closed in around her, Emma knew that she was not alone in the abandoned house on Willow Street. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the peaceful town, Lily found herself standing at the edge of the cliff overlooking the vast ocean. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of everything that had transpired in the past few days. She closed her eyes, taking in a deep breath of salty air, trying to calm the storm raging inside her. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "Lily," it whispered, sending a shiver down her spine. She turned around to see a figure standing a few feet away, cloaked in darkness. It was him, the man who had haunted her dreams for years, the one she thought she had left behind. Fear and anger boiled inside her as she faced him, her fists clenched at her sides. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice wavering slightly. He took a step closer, his features illuminated by the fading light. "I've come to set things right, Lily," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I know I've hurt you, but please, hear me out." Lily felt her resolve waver as she looked into his eyes. Eyes that once held so much love and warmth, now shadowed with pain and remorse. Memories flooded back to her of a time when they were happy, before everything fell apart. Tears welled up in her eyes as she struggled to keep her emotions in check. "It's too late for apologies," she whispered, her voice barely above a sob. "You destroyed everything we had." He reached out a hand towards her, a silent plea in his eyes. "I know I can never undo the past, but I promise to make amends. Let me prove to you that I've changed, that I'm not the same man who hurt you." Lily hesitated, her heart torn between the pain of betrayal and the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could make things right. With a shaky breath, she took a step forward, her hand reaching out to meet his. As their fingers intertwined, a sense of calm washed over Lily, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. As the clock struck midnight, Sarah found herself standing in front of the abandoned mansion she had dreamt of for weeks. The wind howled through the broken windows, sending shivers down her spine. With a deep breath, she pushed open the creaking gate and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Sarah's heart raced as she made her way through the dark corridors, the only sound her own footsteps echoing off the walls. Every shadow seemed to come alive, dancing in the flickering candlelight she held in her trembling hand. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the candle and plunging Sarah into darkness. Panic rose in her chest as she fumbled for a match, her hands shaking violently. Just as she struck the match, a voice spoke behind her, sending a chill down her spine. "Welcome, Sarah," it whispered, sending shivers down her spine. Sarah froze, unable to turn around, unable to move. The voice continued, "You have come seeking answers, seeking truth. But be warned, not all truths are meant to be uncovered." With a deep breath, Sarah finally turned around to face the source of the voice. Before her stood a figure cloaked in shadows, their face hidden from view. Despite her fear, Sarah felt a strange sense of familiarity wash over her. "Why have you brought me here?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible in the darkness. The figure stepped closer, the moonlight revealing their features. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she gazed upon her own reflection, twisted and distorted in the shadows. "I am you, Sarah. I am your fears, your doubts, your darkest secrets," the figure spoke, their voice a haunting echo of her own. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she realized the truth she had been running from all along. The mansion, the voice, it was all a manifestation of her inner turmoil, her inner demons. In that moment, Sarah made a choice to face her fears, to embrace her truths, no matter how painful they may be. With a newfound strength, she looked into the eyes of her reflection and whispered, "I am ready." And as the first light of dawn broke through the windows of the abandoned mansion, Sarah emerged a changed woman, ready to confront the darkness within and embrace the light that always shone beneath. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the sprawling city below, their hearts were heavy with the weight of the day's events. Emily felt a surge of emotion as she remembered the look of sadness in Jack's eyes when she had told him the truth. She had expected anger or disbelief, but not the silent acceptance that had gripped him in that moment. They sat in silence on the rooftop, the cool evening breeze ruffling their hair as they gazed out at the twinkling lights spread out before them. Jack finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. I always knew there was something you weren't telling me, Em, but I never imagined it would be this. Emily turned to face him, her heart aching at the pain she saw in his eyes. She reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away, a bitter smile playing on his lips. You've been lying to me all this time, haven't you? How can I trust anything you say now? Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she struggled to find the right words to explain herself. I never meant to hurt you, Jack. I was just trying to protect you, to keep you safe from the truth. Jack shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. Protect me? Is that what you call it? You've been hiding the truth from me, manipulating me into believing a lie. His voice cracked with emotion as he turned away, his fists clenched in frustration. Emily felt a surge of guilt wash over her as she realized the extent of the damage her secrets had caused. She had thought she was doing the right thing, but now she saw the pain and betrayal reflected in Jack's eyes, and it broke her heart. I'm sorry, Jack. I never wanted it to come to this, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the city below. I understand if you can't forgive me, but please know that I never stopped caring for you. Jack turned back to her, his eyes searching hers for a sign of sincerity. After a long moment of silence, he finally spoke, his voice full of emotion. I don't know if I can forgive you, Emily, but I do know that I can't walk away from this, not yet. And in that moment, as the city lights flickered around them, Emily knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be filled with twists and turns, but she was determined to face it all with Jack by her side, no matter the cost. As the helicopter descended closer to the raging ocean, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The storm was intensifying, and the wind threatened to toss the aircraft like a leaf in the wind. The rescuer beside her held her hand tightly, assuring her with a nod that they would make it out alive. Suddenly, a massive wave crashed against the helicopter, causing it to shudder dangerously. Sarah's grip tightened on the seat as they descended lower and lower, fighting against the fury of the storm. She could barely make out the outline of the overturned boat below, knowing that her husband was somewhere in the cold, churning water. As they finally reached the surface, Sarah's heart stopped, as she saw a lone figure clinging desperately to a piece of the wreckage. It was him, her husband. Without a second thought, she unbuckled herself and prepared to jump into the tumultuous sea. Wait, the rescuer called, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. This is too dangerous. We need to lower a rescue line. But Sarah couldn't wait. With a determined resolve, she flung herself out of the helicopter and into the icy water below. The shock of the cold pierced through her like 1,000 needles, but she pushed the pain aside as she swam towards her husband with all the strength she had left. Their eyes met as she reached him, and in that moment, Sarah knew that they would survive this. Together, with a strength born out of love, they clung to each other, waiting for the rescue line to descend from above. As they were finally hoisted up into the safety of the helicopter, Sarah felt a flood of emotions wash over her. The fear, the uncertainty, the raw determination, it all culminated in a sense of profound gratitude for the chance to live another day. As the helicopter flew them back to land, Sarah held her husband's hand tightly, knowing that they had faced the worst of the storm and emerged stronger for it. The sun began to break through the dark clouds, casting a warm glow over the horizon. And in that moment, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope rise within her, knowing that they had weathered the storm together, and that their love was stronger than any tempest they might face. As the sun began to set on the horizon, casting an orange glow over the city, Emma stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind whipping through her hair. Below her, the crashing waves of the ocean seemed to call out to her, beckoning her to let go of all her pain and fears. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about all she had been through, the heartbreak, the loss, the struggles. But as she stood there, ready to take a step forward into the unknown, a voice behind her made her pause. Emma, stop! It was Eric, the man who had stood by her side through it all, the one who had never given up on her, despite her many flaws and mistakes. She turned to face him, her heart racing in her chest. I can't do this anymore, Eric. I'm tired of fighting, tired of feeling like I'm drowning in my own sorrow. Eric took a step closer to her, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. You are not alone, Emma. You have people who love you, who care about you. You are stronger than you think, and you can get through this. Emma shook her head, her resolve crumbling. But what if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? Eric reached out and gently took her hand, his touch grounding her in a way she had never felt before. You are stronger than you know, Emma, and you are not alone. I will be by your side every step of the way, no matter what. We will face the darkness together, and we will come out stronger on the other side. Emma looked into his eyes, seeing the love and sincerity in them, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope spark within her. She took a deep breath, wiping away her tears, and nodded. Together, hand in hand, they turned away from the edge of the cliff and walked back towards the city, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Emma knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but with Eric by her side, she believed that she could overcome anything. Love and hope intertwining to create a future brighter than she had ever imagined possible.